Transfiguration. He's going to help us to come to see God better, and yet we still will not fully comprehend how great God is. He's only going to touch on a few attributes of God, a few examples of God's greatness, but there are so many more that could be recorded. In Psalm 145 and verse 3, we'll begin in verse 1 and work our way down to verse 3. I will extol Thee, my God, O King, and I will bless Thy name forever and ever. Every day will I bless Thee, and I will praise Thy name forever and ever. Great is the Lord, and greatly to be praised, and His greatness is unsearchable. God's greatness is unsearchable. It's past finding out. It's past relating or revealing to another person. We can tell another person some things about how great God is, but we cannot fully reveal that to them. It's simply past our ability to relate it to them. Now let's consider our outline tonight and work our way through it. We want to consider 3 points that Psalm 104 makes concerning how great God is. First of all, we will notice that His clothing is great. We will notice that His chariot is great. And finally, we'll notice that His creation is great. We'll begin with His clothing. If you'll take a look at Psalm 104 in verses 1 and 2, the psalm reads, Bless the Lord, O my soul. O Lord my God, Thou art very great. Thou art clothed with honor and majesty, who coverest Thyself with light as with a garment, who stretchest out the heavens like a curtain. Notice that we find in verse 1 that God is clothed with honor and with majesty. Notice in verse 2 that He is covered, as it were, with light, light being His garment. God's clothing is great. You know, sometimes very rich and very powerful people, there are those that tell us things about their clothing. For example, there were gowns that famous people have worn. And those are in museums, and we might stand there and we might look at those gowns or those garments, and we might see pearls that have been made into the garment, or we might see gold, or we might see some type of precious silk or material, or some type of work that's been made into that garment that makes it worth maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars. You think about some of the items that belong to people like Princess Diana, people that were known throughout the world, and how precious those things are considered to be. Even the recent marriage. You remember there's a great deal that was said about the wedding and what was involved in the wedding and about the gown that Kate was going to wear and who had designed it and what it was like. All of those things are things that catch the attention of individuals. And yet there never has been a garment that has ever been made, that has ever been worn, that can compare to the garment that God is arrayed in. Now, I know that God is a spirit, and I understand that about God. I understand God is not physical in the sense that we are. He doesn't have a physical body like we do. And so when the Bible describes Him, the Bible is describing Him in terms that we can understand, using language that makes sense to us. And yet the psalmist here speaks of God's clothing, and speaks of God as being clothed with honor and with majesty and with light. Notice some other passages. Psalm 93 and verse 1. Psalm 93 and verse 1. The Lord reigneth. He is clothed with majesty. The Lord is clothed with strength, wherewith He hath girded Himself. The world also established that it cannot be moved. God's clothed with majesty. God's clothed with strength. You may just want to start making a list of some of the things that God is said to be clothed with. In Isaiah 59 and verse 17, a passage that has reference no doubt to the Messiah, but it's describing how He is adorned. Verse 17, He put on righteousness as a breastplate and a helmet of salvation upon His head, and He put on the garments of vengeance for clothing and was clad with zeal as a cloak. And so we have righteousness and salvation and vengeance and zeal is all a part of the garments, all a part of who God is and of His nature. Daniel chapter 7 and verse 9, Daniel talks about seeing God. And of course he did not see God in a direct kind of way, but he saw God revealed to him. And this is the way that he described God. In Daniel chapter 7 and verse 9, I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, the hair of his head like the pure wool. His throne was like the fiery flame, and His wheels as burning fire. Notice the Ancient of Days, clothed in a garment that was white as snow. And yet, again and again in the Bible, we read of our need to be arrayed in garments that are as white as snow. We are supposed to be like God. We're supposed to be trying to be like God. And here's the description of God, who's arrayed in a garment that's white as snow. And one day we can be arrayed in those white garments of salvation. We one day can be present with Him there in our being arrayed in that way. Notice Matthew chapter 17 and verse 2. This is the Mount of Transfiguration, of course. We see Jesus transfigured. We have His garment described when that took place. Matthew chapter 17 and verse 2 says, and was transfigured before them, and His face did shine as the sun, and His raiment was white as the light. His raiment white as the light. Now there are commercials, of course, that appear on television for various detergents, and you may have seen some of them. And one of them has the slogan, the whitest whites. And they compare their white, what their detergent can do, with a garment compared to what other detergents can do. And yet there never has been a garment as white as the garment that God wears. Because in Him there is no sin. There is not even the possibility of lying, Titus 1 and verse 2. It's perfect righteousness. Imagine the brightness that is associated with that. 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse 16. 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse 16. Take a look at another description of God.